China has announced that it will ramp up its defence spending by 7%, taking it to $330 billion, citing complex security challenge at its most important political meeting of the year. Joining us now is the Dean of Global Futures and Political Analyst at Curtin University, Joe Siracusa. So what this shows is China's got no intention of slowing down when it comes to its military spend, so it's just going to get a whole lot bigger, Joe.
Well, good morning, Pete. Well, yes, it is. But keep in mind that the Chinese are playing catch up. The Americans spent about $850 billion on defense next time around, this bill anyway. And they're spending 7.2, they have a 7.2% increase. Yes, but they've been playing catch up for a long time. You know, they have a Navy that looks pretty good. They don't have any assault troops or anything like that. I mean, they're a long way from invading anybody or doing much of that. So I think, Pete, this is very important. I know the next piece is on Trump, but the President Xi and then later on Trump, they both have to deal with public opinion. It's very important for Xi to look tough in foreign policy. He's got trouble with semiconductors. I mean, they're going to slide backwards on that. And he's increasing the diplomatic corps by about 12%. Now, he's got to explain his message around the world as well as to his own people. There are 1.4 billion people in China, and they're sliding backwards in terms of, you know, a lot of people are getting older. There's no replacement to pay for their pensions, et cetera, because of the one China policy. I think China's in a lot more trouble than anybody ever wants to imagine. But yes, they are aggressive, and they could actually stumble into something they don't want to. But right now, I wouldn't worry about them too much. But I think Xi is looking over his shoulder. As you can see, all those people there, any one of them would like to take his place. So I wouldn't want to trade places with him.
Well, what did you think of Donald Trump's speech on the weekend, Joe?
I thought it was terrific. Look, he had trouble after the midterms. He had trouble explaining what the hell he was doing, and even Biden had trouble explaining how he won. So let's just set that aside. He came back pretty well. He got a straw vote at the Conservative PAC thing there. He got 62% of the vote. He swept everybody aside. But what I liked about his speech is he said, you know, if you want retribution, that is, if you want to go back to Washington, want me to go back to Washington and take care of your enemies. And he threw his enemies under the bus. Karl Rove, Jeb Bush, the Republican Party's attitude towards open borders in the past, globalization, neocons. Pete, he's got his own version of what the gang's going to look like next time around. He looks pretty good. And I you know, a couple of weeks ago, I thought that DeSantis would be able to maybe knock him off in a primary, because that's what the polls showed. But I think Trump's come back pretty well. And you know what? He's had this taste for power, and I think he's moderated his tone a little bit. That is, he appeals to extreme views. But on the other hand, you know, he looks a little calmer than he used to. Maybe he's taking.
So do you think it comes down to Trump and DeSantis? I mean, DeSantis wasn't there on the weekend. He chose to stay away from it. But does it come down to Trump and DeSantis in the end, in terms of a two-horse Republican race, or do you give Nikki Haley any chance whatsoever, or is she going to be the first domino to fall?
Well, Nikki Haley would be something like 20-1 at the Melbourne Cup. I think DeSantis is about 9-1, and Trump would be 3-1. Look, Trump's going to win the primary. Whether he can win the general, I don't know. I think maybe he can. You know, Americans they're in a fighting mood right now. They're not doing as well as President Biden tells them they are, and it looks like he's reaching out to special interest groups and not paying attention to a lot of people, Pete. Keep in mind, he'd rather go to Kiev in a war rather than go to Ohio to explain to people what happened to a train.
That's true.
Shows you he's a little afraid of public opinion too.
Yeah. Hey, how are you going in Perth, Joe?
Well, pretty well. It's a beautiful city. I like to regard it as the Los Angeles of Australia, and I can't understand why there aren't more people here, Pete.
No, it is beautiful, no doubt about that. Have you got yourself a new football team, or are you still rusted on to whoever you supported in Melbourne? I can't even remember who that was.
Well,
Joe.
I liked Carlton, Melbourne. Of course, I never gave up on the Brisbane Broncos after years in Brisbane. So, no, I got to find a new team out here, or I'll be unliked very quickly. So I'll find something.
Well, man, there's two Brisbane teams are now doing well. There's an amazing first round from the Dolphins there too, so we can't forget about them now. They've factored themselves into the conversation. I didn't know you spent time in Brisbane. There you go, Joe. We'll talk to you next week.
Yes. Well, Okay, bye bye.